Seems that everybody has the solution to the perceived shooting problems in the United States in terms of instructions and clinics and methodologies and books and so on and so forth. But none of them wants to supply the easiest possible solution, and that is have players start on appropriately sized hoops shooting with appropriately sized basketballs. And this is unpopular because everybody thinks that, you know, little Johnny and Susie should be playing with a NBA or WNBA sized ball and shooting on a 10-foot hoop because that's what basketball is played on, is a 10-foot hoop. And so there's a lot of resistance to using hoops that are reduced based on size and using balls that are reduced based on size. And so instead we ask children who lack the strength, hand size, coordination, etc., to shoot with the same size ball on the same size hoop, and consequently we have players who develop habits that are less than ideal because they're having to overcome having smaller hands for the ball and having a lack of strength and still having to get the ball just as high and just as far as an NBA player. And so these are, you know, the individual's attempt to solve the movement problem that we're asking them to solve. And because they lack the strength and they lack the hand size and so forth, their attempts typically are less than ideal because they have to compensate for that lack of size and that lack of strength rather than shooting with a more adult type shot, which they'd probably be able to do if they were on an appropriately sized basket. So simply reducing the basket size and making the size between the basket and the player more in line with the same proportions as an NBA player with an NBA sized basket, and making the basketball in similar proportions between the player, youth player, and the ball as an NBA player and an NBA ball. This would enable children to use more adult-like skill performances. By reducing the size of the basket or manipulating the size of the height of the basket and the size of the ball and making them smaller and therefore from one standpoint making them less like the adult game, we would actually be creating an environment that enables the children to perform in a more adult-like skill performance. So the task constraints would actually be more similar for youth players to the same constraints that we're asking, you know, professional athletes to perform under. And so they would able to more closely link their skill performance and their technique to that of a professional athlete, whereas in the current system with a 10-foot hoop, you know, with maybe a first or second grader and you know, a big ball, it's almost impossible for them to shoot with the same type of technique because the biggest thing is overcoming the lack of strength. And so to me, this is the simplest solution to solving the shooting problems, is to start with an appropriately sized hoop and appropriately sized ball and try to eliminate the bad habits at the beginning so players begin the game, grow and develop with you know, shooting technique that's some close variance of the ideal technique or an adult technique. You know, and so we get rid of the big bad habits, you know, and start to narrow the shooting technique down closer to, you know, the adult technique with a hand under the ball, you know, and a one-handed follow through, you know, and total body coordination, you know, working up into the basket. And if we can do this at a young age, then over time, players should be able to continue to improve as they grow and develop, as opposed to having to learn an entirely different skill performance once they reach, you know, an age and a strength level or a size level where they can actually handle the ball and shoot with something close to, you know, an adult technique or a proper technique.